The difference in meaning is usually explained with some variation of the following. Sympathy is when you share the feelings of another. Empathy is when you understand the feelings of another, but do not necessarily share them. When we hear of sympathy, we tend to think of situations involving emotional pain. When a friend grieves over the loss of a loved one, you might send that friend a sympathy card. The card says that you are feeling sad along with your friend because your friend is grieving. The sim in sympathy means together or at the same time, and is the same Greek prefix that one finds in synonym, symmetry, and symposium. Empathy emphasizes the notion of projection. You have empathy for a person when you can imagine how they might feel based on what you know about that person, despite not having those feelings explicitly communicated. The sentiment behind empathy is often presented to put oneself in another's shoes. A major difference between sympathy and empathy is how long each has been around. Compared to sympathy, which first appeared in English in the 16th century, empathy is a relatively new coinage, one originated from a relatively young science, psychology. The act or capacity of entering into or sharing the feelings of another is known as sympathy. Empathy, on the other hand, not only is it an identification of sorts, but also connotes awareness of one's separateness from the observed. One of the most difficult tasks put upon man is reflective commitment to another's problems while maintaining his own identity. Journal of the American Medical Association from 1958. Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy and sympathy are often grouped together, but they're very different. Empathy is a skill that can bring people together and make people feel included, while sympathy creates an uneven power dynamic and can even lead to more isolation and disconnection. It is an unfortunate outcome, given that sympathy usually comes from a good place. So number one, perspective talking, or putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Number two, staying out of judgment and listening. Number three, recognizing emotion in another person that you have maybe felt before. Number four, communicating that you recognize that emotion. Empathy is a choice, and it is a vulnerable one. Empathy requires us to recall or reflect on feelings that are uncomfortable. We are recognizing feelings like frustration, nervousness, or confusion in trying to take that perspective with another person. Choosing empathy versus sympathy or complete disengagement is often more challenging in the short term, but the long-term reward is much greater. Pity, I acknowledge your suffering. Sympathy, I care about your suffering. Empathy, I feel your suffering. Compassion, I want to relieve your suffering. Sympathy, fellow feeling, community of feeling, is a feeling of care and concern for someone, often someone close, accompanied by a wish to see him or her better off or happier. Compared to pity, sympathy implies a greater sense of shared similarities together with a more profound personal engagement. However, sympathy, unlike empathy, does not involve a shared perspective or shared emotions, and while the facial expressions of sympathy do convey caring and concern, they do not convey shared distress. Sympathy and empathy often lead to each other, but not always. Sympathy should also be distinguished from benevolence, which is a much more detached and impartial attitude. While they are often used interchangeably, there are crucial differences that lead to very different outcomes, polar opposite outcomes actually. Try this experiment. When someone's expressing feelings and you want to help them to solve the problem, what if you just wait a bit, listen more, affirm that those feelings are real, accept it is what it is. Only after that, ask, do you want any ideas on what to do about it, or you got this? According to Oxford Dictionary, sympathy is expressing pity or sorrow for someone else's misfortune. Sympathy tends to drive disconnection. It often makes people feel like there's a distance between them and that one person who does not understand their experience. Sympathy communicates that it must be so difficult to be you right now. And I'm having a hard time seeing how you feel that way. It says that you do not necessarily understand where they're coming from. In taking this approach, in communicating things like, I feel so sorry for you, can sometimes make things worse. It can exacerbate discomfort in relationships and lead to increases in shame. The feeling of sympathy emerges from the recognition that another person is suffering, in contrast to empathy, where the other person's pain or suffering is actually felt. A person expresses sympathy but shares empathy. Of the two, empathy is a deeper feeling, but sympathy can be just as honest and heartfelt. However, empathy can forge a deeper and a more meaningful connection, thus serving as a bridge for greater communication between individuals. The basis for both sympathy and empathy is compassion, a blending of understanding and acceptance of others that can be seen as being derived or enhanced by knowledge and wisdom. Passion recognizes the me in you, the shared commonality of feelings between individuals. Both sympathy and empathy imply caring for another person. But with empathy, the caring is enhanced or expanded by being able to feel the other person's emotions. The capacity to sympathize and empathize are considered vital for a sense of humanity, i.e. the ability to understand one's fellow humans and their problems. People who lack this capacity are often classified as narcissistic, sociopathic, or in extreme cases, psychopathic. However, these terms are only applicable if a person consistently lacks the capacity to sympathize or empathize with others. In general, there are many cases where people may not feel sympathetic or empathic due to lack of knowledge or because their experiences are different. This does not imply abnormal behavior. On the other hand, some people are overly empathic and can eventually become overwhelmed by the negative feelings they take on from the relationship and encounters with other people. Sympathy directs attention to how you feel. Empathy is about listening, and it tells the other you are paying attention to how he or she feels. Sympathy is about me. Empathy is about you. Empathy has nothing to do with how you feel. It is about understanding how the other feels given their circumstance. It is easy to understand why people confuse sympathy and empathy. Both explain our reactions to the misfortunes of others. You will often find them together, and it is common to see them wrongly treated as synonyms. A simple way to identify which one you are feeling is to look for any commonality with the feeling, situation, or experience. Can you imagine yourself in the same situation? This will show you whether you empathize. If you only feel sad for them, you are feeling sympathy.